Welcome back to the next episode of the Adventures of the Monk and the Monarch. We had a bit of a delay this time. A lot of issues came up on both of our ends.
Yeah, things happen.
But as usual, you got me, the Monarch, and my co-host, Mildra the Monk.
Hello.
When we get into our actual topic today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite anime directors, Satoshi Kon. Until we get that far in, we'll look at all the stuff we've been watching for the past couple months.
I suppose as is tradition, I'll end up starting because apparently we are ordering these by height.
Good enough way to do it, I guess.
And how do I know you're shorter than me? Law of averages. Besides, nobody tall would try and cosplay as Kefka.
I don't know. I'm sure some tall motherfucker's done that in the past.
Yeah, and giving people nightmares. But I will admit that when it came to my watch schedule, I did get a bit delayed because for the first half of December I was sick, which is also the reason why we couldn't do this. We couldn't do this episode earlier in the month like I had initially planned. But I have elected to do a bit of catch up on some series in the 2000s and early 2010s that I kind of missed out on, as well as of course the stuff I'm doing for the Parliament. When it comes to stuff I missed out on, I decided to take a look at both Last Exile as well as its follow-up. Now you know how I am about CG in anime.
Yeah.
I understand it can be used as a way to cut costs. It's best to find a way to blend that in so that you don't notice it. Yeah. And Gonzo who animated Last Exile, did a lot of stuff with integrating CG, especially when the budget needed to be stretched. I didn't have as much of an issue because one of the better ways to integrate CG is when you're using it to replicate some sort of fantastical tech or just something that isn't supposed to be on the realism scale, and the van ships certainly count as that. I'll always have a sucker for this sort of diesel punk approach. I know some people refer to Last Exile as steampunk. No, it's more diesel than steam. Now that being said, the second season felt it's not even the second season, it's a follow-up. Felt very unnecessary, and it was expanding the setting in ways that didn't need to be expanded. When you have a setting that makes it very clear that this is just one small part of a larger whole, sometimes it's best not to show that larger whole. And this was one of those cases. Now, of course, I'm still doing stuff for the Parliament. Recently, I ended up going through the first season of Noragami, which I ended up finding out that the director of Noragami, that's the only director credit that he has.
Huh.
Even though he's been working... Huh?
I wouldn't have guessed. Thought it was a really competently done show.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, why has this guy not had more director roles? Most of the credits I could find with him were storyboard artist for a few episodes, or second unit director for an episode or two. An episode or two per season. Usually working with companies like A1 Pictures. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but I gotta ask the question. This was very well done and very well presented. Why does this guy not have more directorial roles under his belt? I'm guessing in this case it's a by choice thing. That's my approximation. I obviously have no clue if that's the case.
Is it possible he's using like a different name? I don't know why he would, but
no. This isn't a case of him working under a pseudonym. Yeah. I double checked. Unless it's a pseudonym that's kept so kayfabe nobody knows about it, which you'll forgive me if I have my doubts on that.
Yeah, because I did watch the Noragamis. Like, I didn't watch them when they came out. I was a little late to that party too when I finally got to it, but it's good stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's not one of those like weird shows that like they don't know it's gonna be good. It's like they clearly cared and thought it was gonna be a good idea. It wasn't some like weird niche thing. So I can't imagine he would have been worried about using his normal director name for this shit.
Yeah, it's one of the... Either way, I'd like to see him direct more. I'd like to see him direct more anime than just be a storyboard artist. I feel like he's not living up to his full potential. one of the co-hosts for the show had suggested politics may be a factor. That's a case where I'm not going to say that it's impossible that politics are a factor, but I'd need more.
But yeah, it's entirely possible he just likes to be a storyboard guy. He might not also want a huge workload.
Especially since this is the case in the States, and I'd imagine it's also a case in Japan. Ever since in the history of film, for a good amount of the early days of film, the primary creative voice was the producer. Then the movie brats happened in the 70s, and the director was the main creative force. And the guy who all roads pointed to. If a film did well, it was because of the director. If a film fucked up, it was because of the director. And I usually whenever voice acting is not very good in an anime, more often than not I blame the director than I blame the voice actor. Yeah. Sometimes I'll blame the voice actor if the situation calls for it, especially if it's a voice actor I'm not all that fond of. But otherwise, it's usually on an issue of direction. Now I want to note we only did season 1, which does differ a bit from the anime. I did end up making a joke of did the writer of the manga get inspired by Rurouni Kenshin, because there's some Kenshin DNA in this.
I can see it. Had to think for a second just because it has been a while since I've watched Noragami, but yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not going to use the rip-off claim because frankly that term has been the victim of genericide.
Yeah. Definitely.
What I will say though is, again, there's some vestigial DNA of that.
And look, I'm a big Kenshin fan. Like, I'm entirely okay with people cribbing a bit more stuff from Rurouni Kenshin.
You're probably looking forward to seeing the remake when that comes out.
I'm a little worried just because remakes in general get me a little sketchy, but I am gonna watch it. Like, I think it can be good.
Well, I'd say Japan has a better track record when it comes to that kind of thing. I will say if they animate the Jinshu arc, all is forgiven, because that's the one problem I had with the anime. That instead of going with that arc, they went with this random ass arc about a religious leader, and that was it.
Look, I will not entirely let Japan opt for remakes quite yet, just because I've seen what the stuff they're doing with Trigun, which has me iffy. I'm not going to say it's going to be bad this early, but I'm worried.
I'm looking at that the way I look at a lot of how a lot of people have reacted to the FF7 remake, a remake that by the by people were clamoring for about 2 generations. And my mindset is, I think a lot of people are far too attached to the idea of the anime because it was one of their first. Much in the same way that a lot of people are far too emotionally attached to FF7 because it was their first in one form or another.
Yeah.
And when you have that level of attachment, it can blind you to the bigger picture.
Well, I said, like, I'm still gonna give it a shot. I like some things I've seen about it. I'm a little iffy on the CG.
It's being it's being done by the same studio that did Beastars, so
like they got the best CG guys you can effectively get for a project like this.
Yeah. But what it really tells me, what this whole thing really tells me is there is a very wide gap between people who have read the Trigun manga and haven't. Cause
I know the anime differed a lot from the manga. Like, I don't really read manga. It's never been a format I've liked. Same reason I don't really read many comic books.
I think the key thing with that is a lot of people are, in each of these cases, a lot of people are hung up on what something should look like.
Yeah.
To the point of dogma in a lot of cases. If I took that mode of thinking to its logical conclusion, I would have to throw under the bus John Carpenter's The Thing, as well as The Fly. Both of those are technically remakes, but they are vastly different in tone. in style and tone
Oh yeah.
compared to the originals.
Yeah, and I know this came up a while back. Like, I really liked that Digimon reboot they did. There was
Hmm.
definitely a lot of changes to that, but still came out really good.
Yeah, I'll probably end up tackling this
Yeah.
sometime next year, but when it comes to adaptation, there seems to be there's this kind of pendulum thing. On one hand, people who want to be 100% to the source material, no changes whatsoever, which when you're adapting to a different medium is way too much of an ask. And then you have the other end that's like screw the source material, we're just going to do our own thing. And much like most discourses these days, instead of seeing a pendulum, they just see the opposite ends of it swinging. Like imagine a pendulum that's made out of just two frames. It is something to explore down the road. But the final thing I wanted to cover was the YouTube original series Obsolete, which will be covered. I will be going into this in detail on a future episode of the Parliament of Geeks, depending on when we do it. But Obsolete was a 12 episode web series, each episode about 13 minutes long, so it's a pretty breezy watch if you want to marathon it. I don't recall the animation studio, but we are dealing with mechs in a very military sci-fi kind of way. One that is exploring the consequence of an alien tech, basically changing the face of warfare. As far as a CG anime, when it comes to the mech and the mech designs, it is absolutely superb. Sometimes they look like mechs out of District 9, and sometimes they look like mechs out of Votoms. In fact, Votoms is a good analogy for their size because they're not the 25 feet behemoths that you would see in say Gundam or Macross. I'd say about 10 to I'd say they're probably about 10 to 15 feet.
So
Which
probably
is why
similar to the size you'd see in something like the 86.
I still haven't seen
Uh,
86, so I'll take your word for
yeah,
it. But
that's roughly the size. I think those ones get a bit bigger than that, but that's roughly the size.
Um, but the Votom things like Scope Dog and Armor Trooper Votoms is about the size of these things, as well as the armed slaves from Full Metal Panic. In fact, because of the design, they do remind me of the armed slaves more than anything else, especially with the tank-like design when it comes to the sensor setup. It's not far removed from some tanks. Um, Also, this thing when it comes to tanks, this thing loves the Abrams, of course. And well, Zan and I have had lengthy discussions regarding some of the firearm usage. Uh, Although the undisputed king of firearm use in anime is still Gunsmith Cats.
Oh, Gunsmith Cats. I was so happy I got around to watching that before that last episode we did. It was
Because
great.
and to be um I made and to be fair, some of that is due to the fact that the mangaka is a gun enthusiast,
Yeah.
much like the mangaka for Initial D is a gearhead, which incidentally is also the reason why I've had a rocky relationship with sports anime because the sport just feels like a backdrop in a lot of cases.
I don't think most sports anime are made for sports fans.
Um, I don't think most sports anime are made by sports fans.
That too. I can vouch for this because I am not a sports fan, and I'm like, if I were going to make a sports anime, it might look like some of these.
Like I look at say Ice Shield 21. Ice Shield 21 feels like so. Now, of course, I'm not. I am not. I'm not good. I'm not putting past the possibility that there's a different set of rules for NFL Japan than there is in the States. Or rather, it's not even NFL Japan anymore. I think it's under a different name. But the point is, it's possible that the Japanese version of American football doesn't use NFL rules. It could use CFL rules for all. Actually, no, it doesn't use CFL rules because the goalpost isn't at the front of the goal. But the there's a rudimentary idea of football and trying to shoehorn that into the over the topness of shonen, which I think can be done, but I think it requires somebody to know what they're dealing with. And with the recent wave of shows that try and integrate a degree of informational material that we've had in the last 2 years. The two big examples being Dr. Stone and, oddly enough, Food Wars.
Yeah.
As well, and while I'm at it, I may as well throw in Cells at Work. I think the same thing can be done with sports. Of course, there's also the issue that American football isn't going to be as popular as football in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, Captain Tsubasa has been an icon for decades, but that's kind of what I've been watching aside from a few catch up stuff that I've already talked about. I'm not going to talk further about The Witch from Mercury because I'd rather save my talk about that series when a season is finished.
Yeah, I'm still waiting to actually start watching that. That's been one of the few Gundam shows in recent days, or even mech shows in general, that I'm like, this seems weird enough. Like, it has my interest. I'll give this one a shot.
Well, I just like using shows like that to make Giga eat shit. Because no, I will never let go that he tried to insist that Mecha is dead in the West.
Yeah. As for me, though, like, I'll not go into, like, all the different Satoshi Kon stuff I was watching, just getting ready for this. Because he has a very distinct style, even when he's going from something as dark as Perfect Blue to Millennium Actress, which is a lot more romanticized in some ways. So I'd be repeating a lot of things going through some of these movies, so I'll just kind of sum up all the Satoshi Kon stuff as it's great for now. Otherwise, I got through Thriller Bark in One Piece. I love Brook. I don't think there has been a character in One Piece where I more quickly realized I loved them than Brook. Like, it was all of 2 or 3 lines out of it, and I'm like, this is my guy. I love him. And it is one of the few instances in which having to look up the explanation for a joke didn't kill it for me. And that was the 45-degree angle thing. Like, I got there was a lot of Michael Jackson references going on in Thriller Bark. And it was partially a reference to the 45-degree angle slant Michael would do, which is ridiculously hard to do because of the balance you need to not fall the fuck over. So, half reference to that.
Are you speaking from experience when it comes to trying to do the slant?
I have not slanted so far that I fell over. I quickly realized, like, that's not happening. I don't want to hurt myself. But yeah, the other part of that joke is apparently when you say 45-degree angle, it sounds almost identical to saying, like, after death. And it's Brook. This guy is nothing but pun after pun, and I love it. Otherwise, though, yeah, nope. Thriller Barks, it's a solid One Piece arc.
Yeah. Are you watching dub or sub?
Sub. I've only listened a little bit to the dub, and no.
In the dub, Brook is played by Ian Sinclair, and the reason I bring this up is because there's been a running gag I've been doing in watch parties for months, and I've stated that one of these days I will make a T-shirt of this gag and give it to him, and that is me exclaiming after a bad pun or something like that, "God damn it, Ian!" It started where I would just ad-lib say that while doing a watch and riff of how heavy are the dumbbells you lift, which also counts on the list of information anime,
and one that I love that show more than I probably should, but yes.
It's also a case of tell me you wanted to use Macho Man without telling me you wanted to use Macho Man. Because go back and listen to that ending and tell me it's trying its best to be the legally distinct version of the Village People. And the funny thing is, this is not the first time I've made that joke, because I did that exact same joke when it came to Stardust Memory with Gundam. Because you listen to the opening and it syncs up very well with Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins. Yeah. And there's been the running gag for years that Sunrise wanted to use Danger Zone, but the price was too high, so they used a legally distinct thing instead. I don't know if there's any truth to that rumor, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, though, I will say about Thriller Bark is I've always kind of been a bit back and forth on whether or not I like Usopp. I find I either love him and his antics, or he annoys me and I want him to go away. This has me on the end of loving him, if only for this is the weirdest bit of character development I think I've seen. And that is, what was the name? Soge King. I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce it.
Yep.
But that Soge King has effectively become another personality in his mind that he is having conversations with. His character growth is he's basically now having a mental breakdown. It's hilarious.
I've had two observations when it comes to Usopp. One is he's kind of morphed into an audience surrogate because he's the closest thing to normal among the Straw Hats. And you can't see it, but I'm doing massive finger quotes when saying normal and a One Piece character in the same sentence. But he is the closest thing to that.
Once you said that out loud, I'm like, yeah, that sounds right.
He's kind of become analogous to Sokka within the group. Not in terms of being brilliant, but in terms of being kind of the odd man out when everybody has some sort of special training or some sort of superpower. Whereas he's just somebody who faked it till he made it.
Yeah.
And I'd say this is a case of the value of as Maddie would say, long-term booking.
Yeah.
Because early on, he was go-away heat for me. As time went on, I warmed up to him until he's in the position of being the straight man. Although at this point, at the point that you're at, it's a straight man who is currently losing his damn mind.
Yes. I will also say about him in this arc is One Piece is kind of a great idea of sometimes all you need to get something over is commitment. Like, you had that one chick, her name escapes me, she has the negative ghost power, where the ghost passes through somebody, they're just overwhelmed by their negative emotions. The moment I saw those ghosts, I'm like, alright, whoever's creating them, it's gonna be Usopp who fights and beats her. Like, I saw that punchline coming from a mile away. But then it finally gets to that fight, and then she feels so bad for him when her ghost doesn't work. She starts cheering him on. I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter that I kind of saw this punchline coming. The sheer level of commitment to this bit makes it hilarious again.
Well, there's a reason why setup and payoff are talked about it so much in any film class you go to, and it's for reasons like this. If you're gonna do the setup, you need to do some sort of payoff. Yeah. And if the payoff isn't satisfactory, then the question is, why'd you do the setup?
Yeah. And again, it helps that it's that sheer commitment to it that came after. Because if the ghost just went through Usopp, like, oh, it doesn't work, he's going to be fighting her now, I don't think it really would have hit. It's her cheering him on because of how bad she felt for him. Because of how miserable his life must have been.
I liken it to, when it comes to that commitment, I liken it to the creative ways that characters like Moon Knight and Deadpool have found to beat Taskmaster. Since Taskmaster's whole gimmick is he's able to memorize people's attack patterns. Like he has this kind of perfect memory about him. Well, in the case of Deadpool, he couldn't memorize his patterns because even Deadpool didn't know what he was going to do. And in the case of Moon Knight, his mindset is, okay, if he's going to memorize patterns that I do, I'll attack him by trying to crash a plane into him. Because Moon Knight is batshit crazy.
Yeah, beyond that, a show we've talked about a little bit before, Spy Family, Part 2 came out. If you're looking for anything that much different than the first part, you're not really getting that. It's basically just more Spy Family.
They've got something that works and they're sticking to it. Can't fault them for that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm not as big on this show as some people are, but I see the appeal. The only real thing I want to say about it is just based off what you see a lot of people talking about. I don't think Lloyd Forger gets as much credit as he deserves for basically being one of the best written characters in the show. Most of the people will talk about like Anya and how adorable she can be, or Yor, who is very hilarious. But it's Lloyd Forger that makes the show work, I think.
Lloyd is an ideal straight man for this kind of show.
Yes.
the big gag with a lot of them is when it comes to trying to do home life, they have difficulties doing that. I'd say the person who's the worst at it is Yor, especially when the wine comes out. I mean, if she's on the job being an assassin, she is as cold and calculating as you can get. But outside of that, not so much.
I won't spoil the joke for anyone who hasn't watched it. What I will say is my favorite moment of Yor in like this whole series was the tennis ball bit. I won't say any more than that just because I don't want to kill that joke for anyone who hasn't watched part 2 yet.
Well, I guess they had to up the stakes after her casually throwing a I think it was a soccer ball so hard it punched a hole.
Yeah. So that's basically Spy Family. If you like the first part, you'll probably like the second part. There's also the last season of Mob Psycho I watched. It's not that season 3 is bad, because I did like it. It just feels like they already blew their load last season. None of the emotional payoffs hit really nearly as hard, I felt. The action also wasn't as good. It kind of felt like they were just using this season to kind of tie up all the little loose ends that were still floating around.
I chalk up some of that to the fact that Mappa has been doing way too much shit.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to put this entirely on Mappa, because one thing I'll say with Season 2, you had that kind of stretch where Regan was doing the press tour, trying to convince everyone he was still psychic, but Mob's kind of the one that pulled him out and stopped him from completely butchering his reputation. And they have that moment where both of them kind of acknowledge, like, okay, Mob's basically known the whole time Regan wasn't really psychic. There's kind of that acknowledgement between them, which leads to kind of the finale of this season just not hitting because we already kind of had that reveal last season. Like, if they just didn't do that, I think the ending of season 3 would have been a lot better.
I will note this. The body improvement, the people in the body improvement club are a perfect representation of some of the gym rats I know who've helped me out, which is why I love those guys so much.
Those guys are fantastic.
Gym rats are some of the most wholesome motherfuckers you will meet.
I have met some very nice and fun people going to the gym before.
Yeah, because
they're great.
A lot of people seem to think that gym rats are the do you even lift bro douches. You might find some of those people at Muscle Beach or in bodybuilding circles, but at gyms.
Still though, good show. 3 other things I watched. 1, Shinobi no Itoki. As far as I know, this is not getting a dub. There's good reason for this. Like, I said a couple times before on some of our other episodes, like, so far this has been turning out to be like one of the best years of anime since like I've started regularly watching again. This show is the exception to that. Like, have you ever seen a show that's trying to make you take it seriously, but everybody is an idiot? Like, without fail.
Yes. Any show. Kawahara.
It's a modern day ninja clan kind of setup, where no one knows there's actually still ninja clans. It's all secret for reasons that are never actually explained, but we'll just run with this for a minute. They don't explain to the guy who's going to become the next head that ninja clans are even a thing, so he's had no actual ninjutsu training of any kind. I don't know why they don't tell him. This is never explained. He finds out because a bunch of people try to kill him one day. Now, their great plan to protect him after this is to send him to a school where people from all different ninja clans claim to learn to be ninja. You know, they're sending him there with clan people who want to kill him. And they're not like sending their people over to help protect him while he's there. No, they're not doing any of that. They also don't tell him that the year he's going into presumes he already knows how to use a variety of modern day ninja tools, which he does not, including a bodysuit, which is basically it's a strength, speed enhancement kind of bodysuit they have. But if you don't know what you're doing, you can't move in the thing. So now he's in this suit, he can't move in the middle of a forest, which includes people who are there trying to kill him. This is the first 2 episodes, and it keeps getting worse from that point.
You said this was trying to be serious?
It's trying to make me take it serious. Like, if this show was supposed to be a joke, it could have been funny.
Like, This sounds like the setup for a gag comedy anime.
It does, doesn't it?
And I get the feeling that if it was that, you probably would have spoken more highly of it.
Either that, or it might have been kind of it's just the jokes aren't for me, or somewhere in that area. But no, they're trying to make me take this seriously. Again, like,
Well, clearly they're not doing a good job at it.
no, I can't think of one character that actually acts remotely intelligibly. Not one. There's a lot of characters in this show.
So we're dealing with a plot. We're dealing with a story where it only works if everyone is an idiot.
Yeah, I can't think of a show where this many people are this stupid. It's probably going to be the worst anime I've watched all year. Unless something that I've got on my watch list now is just catastrophically stupid. Like, the best thing I can say about this show, or the Shinobi no Toki, is some of the fights are okay. And the animation is fine. That's the best thing I can say about it. Then one of the other, because there's two left I still need to get through. There's Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer, which I watched this just because of that name. It is never explained why it is referred to as the Biscuit Hammer, the giant hammer floating above the earth that's going to destroy it if the good guys lose this game. The evil mage is just crazy, so he created the Biscuit Hammer. It's a show I want to like because it's got a really interesting setup. Effectively, you got these weird spirit animals that are picking people to become the knights to fight against the evil wizard and his golems, and one person who's the princess. It's never explained in detail like how they're selected, but that's not really something that was all that important. What's important is Samahade, the chick who is picked to be the princess. Once she destroys the Biscuit Hammer, wants to use this power to destroy the earth herself. So it's no, I'm going to destroy this world, not you. There's a lot of interesting things going on in it. It does do a pretty good job at making you take a fairly ridiculous premise like this seriously. The problem is it's 24 episodes. There are 12 knights, each with their own knight spirit. Then you also have Samahade and the princess's spirit powering her up. There is not enough time given to a lot of these characters. So you end up with a lot of kind of dead air, it feels like. It basically just either needed to cut down its cast or make it a longer running show. Because it just didn't have time to really explain a lot of what was going on in it. Mm-hmm. So come the end, I'm not even entirely sure what the differences in between each character's powers are. It specifies each person is given a power from their knight, and each one does work a bit differently. But at times it feels like there's so little difference that's an entirely pointless thing to have brought up. Everything just feels like it's getting rushed through. And it's a shame because I really did want to like this one.
Yeah. I'm reminded of when I've ranted on certain shows having way too many characters and using Ruby as a whipping boy for this because instead of developing the characters that they had, Luna and Shawcross have the mindset of let's just add more characters. Which is kind of like someone saying that they'd rather have 100 cheap tanks than 50 expensive ones. Because when you're adding more characters, that means more character designs you have to set up, more character personalities you have to write, more character backstories you have to write. You're essentially doubling or even tripling your work.
Yeah.
Just like if you have twice the tanks, that means twice the manpower, twice the amount of training time, twice the amount of backup supplies for when the thing breaks down, and it will break down. You get the point.
Yeah, because the shows also were really funny at times. Not frequently funny through the whole thing because it's not entirely a comedy. It's mostly intended to be taken seriously.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
It should have been. You're dealing with somebody who wants to destroy the earth with a giant fuck off hammer. That should be. When you described it to me like that, I thought, did Terry Pratchett write this?
The only people who can see the Biscuit Hammer are the people who know it's there. So far it's just the knights, but theoretically, if they walked up to someone and said, "Hey, do you see that giant hammer in the sky poised to kill us all?" They'd look up and go, "Fuck, I do see it." They never do that. As funny as that would be. But no, like, I think if they gave it the time, it would have been an amazing show. They had all the ideas going for it. They did have a lot of really good and interesting characters. Like, the knights are all given a wish for basically their participation in this game. One of my favorite characters is the only one who thought, well, he kind of knows what's going on with the golems. He wished for his little spear guy to power up so that he could create golems himself. And apparently he's the only guy out of hundreds of times this has happened to have thought to do that. To use that wish to just make himself stronger for this fight. Specifically by being able to make the wizard's own golems and use that weapon against him. It was a great character from beginning to end. If they didn't have, like, the two kids who added nothing and, like, one other character, you could have had more time to have him do stuff.
Would it be fair of me to say that the anime was spinning plates?
Yeah, that sounds like a good way to describe it.
Spinning plates while Saber Dance is playing in the background.
Yeah. Said, like, I still didn't walk away hating it, because it did do quite a few things very well. It's just the overall execution very lacking. Which leads one last anime, which I think we might have both watched, Chainsaw Man.
Yeah?
Watched the last episode today. In just about any other year I've been doing this, just like any of my anime reviews, this probably would have been my number 2, if not 3 show of the year. It's great. Because I like the really just violent, over-the-top action, which sometimes I don't feel we get enough shows like that. And this is some bloody and gory, just violence porn, basically, when it wants to be.
Sorry. Remember when we talked about a certain paradox that seems to be present within the discourse of anime?
Yeah.
That paradox, I feel, is apropos when discussing Chainsaw Man.
Yeah.
So much of the OVA days of anime were built on stuff that was pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
And it's always amusing when people come in and are shocked that this kind of thing is pushing the envelope when that's what it's been doing for decades.
Yeah, like, I will say, there is one thing like, that I could see someone like starting this show and absolutely hating it, and that really depends on your view as Denji as the main character. He is unapologetically pathetic with how he's written.
On one hand, that's definitely the case. On the other hand, he did kind of get dealt a bad hand.
Oh yeah, like, but I could see someone watching this show and it's like not wanting to root for this guy, and that's gonna kill this show for a person.
I look at it as a case of long-term booking. Yeah. And some people don't have the patience for long-term booking.
Oh yeah. That said, I love him. He doesn't have big dreams. He's just a simple man with simple desires. And this show is basically saying, like, that's no less important than any of these other people's, like, grand ambitions and desires. He knows what he wants. He's gonna fight for it. Even if it's something as small and stupid as, I want to touch a boob, he's given his all for that. And it works for me. Now, I do think there are a few problems with the show, just in general. There are times it feels like it's kind of dragging, in a way. Specifically, the Infinity Demon, or Devil, I think is what it was called, when they were locked in that kind of hotel room hallway. The actual finale for that bit was great. But it just kind of felt like they were loitering around the halls. Very little was getting done. I don't feel like it added much to any of the characters that were getting introduced there, for the most part. But that is kind of nitpicking little bits of the show to get that. Like, it's not a big complaint against the show as a whole.
Alright, I can certainly get that.
Yeah. If I wasn't, like, actively doing, like, reviews and whatnot, where I do want to try to find little flaws that might bother some people, it's something I may not really have taken much note of. And again, though, I still walked away loving the show by the end. It is... Even if the show didn't want me to take it seriously at all and was just a comedy, I would still probably love it. Especially the nut-kicking bits. I did not expect that to come up more than that one time at the beginning.
Yeah, the glorious return of Dick Kick City.
Like, this show is just ridiculous at what it wants to be. It's that great mix of over-the-top and ridiculous and serious, where they manage to blend the two together very well. So I both laugh and care.
Something that
Yeah.
works for me when it comes to the devils is how ridiculous the design is willing to go.
But, like, I don't know why people weren't talking about these devil designs more, because they're fantastic. I could do without Makima. She's fine. But these devils are great. Like, again, that Infinity Devil bit, I may not have liked most of that little story they were doing, but it was a great villain. The finale to that fight was wonderful. Like, I don't think I've seen a bad design in the show so far. Now, there was the whole bit with the future devil and them kind of fucking up the dialogue a little bit.
You probably heard about how there was that petition in Japan to try and have the thing reanimated, because apparently some people really don't like the CG in the anime. I don't mind it, actually.
Yeah. I think it, like, blends together. Like, it never feels out of place. And that's all I really ask for if you're going to put in CG. It shouldn't feel out of place. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that universally, because sometimes it helps to make it feel out of place, but in general, just don't feel out of place.
The dividing line for me is when the CG takes me out of the moment. And that's not really a problem that I've had with this particular series.
Yeah, that pretty much covers all the anime I've been watching. Is there anything else that's been on your list, or was it just those few?
Just those few. There's probably going to be more next time around.
Yeah.
It's just that spending a large amount of time sick on and having to deal with a chair that doesn't want to cooperate, kind of messes with you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, with that out of the way, we'll get into the topic of the day. Today we're talking about Satoshi Kon.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like, for me, the first thing, like, I'd actually associated his name with was paranoia, but as we all know, like, his career started a fair while before that.
Oh yeah. He got started all the way back in the mid '80s doing manga. His manga debut was Toriko in '84.
No, a weird thing, like,
no relation to that Toriko.
Yeah. Yeah, like, an odd thing I noticed, like, looking up a bunch of stuff for Kon, is if you compare him to, like, either Miyazaki or any other director we may take a look at in the future, he doesn't have, like, the most prolific catalog of stuff he's done. At least not where his name gets credited on them.
No, he's certainly worked. He certainly worked in the background, and he has a handful of stuff. Kon is a case of less is more.
Yeah.
He doesn't have and I think part of the reason he doesn't have a lengthy bibliography is he has not done, and he has not really done a whole lot of work in TV anime.
Yeah.
All of the, I'd say most if not all of the stuff that he's done has either been film or OVA, with only a few exceptions. The original JoJo anime that came out in 93, that was 13 episodes, so that counts as TV.
Yeah. Now, I will specify, when I was looking into that, he only directed 3 of those episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah. The first big thing I saw his name attached to was he was an uncredited artist on the Akira manga.
I don't think he's gotten a lot of credit for his involvement with the Memories anthology.
Oh yeah, I love Magnetic Rose.
But I think part of the reason for that is the name that got top billing for that was Katsuhiro Otomo, even though he was just one of the 3 directors for it. Because remember, that was an anthology of 3 stories: Magnetic Rose, Stink Bomb, and Cannon Fodder.
Yeah. Now, another thing to be clear on, he was the script writer for Magnetic Rose. Like, he still hadn't really stepped into directing much yet.
Yeah, Magnetic Rose was directed by Koji Morimoto, who is a story in and of himself, and was also involved with Akira. Yeah. Granted, he was involved with the film, not the manga, but still. By the time the 90s rolled around, he was doing more film stuff than he was doing manga stuff, because after that you have World Apartment Horror, which is is a manga adaptation of a film.
A film he also wrote.
And also had Otomo involved, so fancy that. there was Seraphim, which was never finished. That was going to be a collab with Mamoru Oshii. It was partially reprinted, and we got it in English about back in 2015, but it was never finished. And then there was Opus, which was never finished.
Yeah, like I think it was a short while after that World Apartment Horror Z thing was done. There's like one other anime thing he worked on. I forget the name, but it's not one I think really got a lot of traction.
The person who was most responsible for giving him his big break was Otomo. Since you look at a lot of the early stuff he did, Otomo's name crops up more than once.
Yeah.
Because World Apartment Horror was directed by Otomo. Rojin Z was written by Otomo. Hashire Melos, which I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it.
Yeah, that's the one I was trying to look up, was the Hashir Melos. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong too.
But the thing that's kind of funny is that it's kind of an odd man out when it comes to a lot of his early stuff, because a lot of Kon's early stuff, because of the fact that I think he was studying under Otomo, leaned into science fiction. Melos is a historical piece.
And at this time, he was also mostly doing like layouts and animation. Like he's one of those guys. He got his start basically as an artist of sorts, an animator.
Yeah, and in fact, his Toriko ended up getting the award for superior newcomer, which I feel like is basically the equivalent of getting a best new artist award.
JoJo's, I think, was actually the first time he did direct anything,
even if it was just for a short time.
Yeah.
Because that particular, I know a lot of people, when they think of JoJo, they're going to think of the more recent anime, which I'm not even sure if they're even going to do further seasons into the rebooted universe now that Stone Ocean is finished. But I think when it came to the '93 version, I'm not entirely sure if the higher ups knew what they were getting themselves into. They just grabbed a manga that was getting some buzz, because they decided in a 5,000 IQ move to just adapt Stardust Crusaders.
No, I remember seeing some interviews that were done in regards to that. It was picked because apparently it was the most popular, even in the manga up to that point. So it wasn't like just a random point they picked in the JoJo story. They went with the most recent one that was coming out. Well, no, because when was Stardust Creators is the manga out? Wasn't that like late 80s, early 90s?
Let me check.
I think it was early 90s because you had the Vanilla Ice reference.
Stardust Crusaders was 89 to 92. Imagine doing that with, say, DBZ. Imagine if the DBZ anime started at the Frieza arc.
Yeah. Like, I'll give JoJo's this. You can pick it up at any one of the parts and follow along. I think you're missing a lot of things that add more context, but you can just pick it up and go from any arc. Kind of like with One Piece. You're going to be missing a lot, but it's fine.
Although maybe the reason they didn't want to pick up Battle Tendency is because Germans.
Look, Stroheim remains my favorite character in all of JoJo's. I love Stroheim, unironically.
I'm not disagreeing on that front. I'm just pointing out a bit of the timing thing.
Yeah. But before we go off more on odd JoJo lore,
I think everybody would say the true breakout moment for him was Perfect Blue.
Yeah, like it's another one. Like I read some of the interviews about Perfect Blue at the time. He did get that off of the strength of his episodes in JoJo. For people who don't know about Perfect Blue, it was a book that they were basing the story on. Kon actually came into that project a little late because at first they wanted to do a live action version of Perfect Blue, the book.
I think that would have been a terrible idea, especially with a major theme with Satoshi Kon's work is blurring the lines between fantasy and reality and how people perceive it.
Now, see, if he was brought in at the point where they wanted to still do it live action, I'd agree with you. It would have been a bad choice because he actually changed a lot about the original script to the point he probably should have been credited as a writer because he rewrote the entire script they gave him when they decided it was going to be an animated project.
On one hand, I could see that. On the other hand, I'm reminded of what happened when, in regard to Irvin Kershner and The Empire Strikes Back. Maybe it's for the best that they didn't, because I'd imagine the original writer would probably be plenty pissed off at that,
Yeah.
and somebody pissed off at that level is liable to break out the lawyers.
But yeah, basically, once he got the project, he hadn't read the book. When he read the screenplay that was originally going to be for the live action before they wanted to do it animated, which is why they brought in Kon, he basically asked the writer, it's like, look, this isn't the kind of thing I'd want a director work with. Original writer basically agreed, all right, you can make all these changes you want. Well, the writer from the book, I should say, not the...
Okay, so if he did make the change, I think it's the crediting thing that would, even if he did have the blessing, the crediting thing, it can still be an issue.
Yeah. All the author really wanted him to keep was it was going to be about an idol and kind of the horror-esque elements and a psycho fan. Mm-hmm. Those were the only elements he asked Kon keep intact for the animated adaptation.
And obviously, a lot of the film is a massive slam on the idol culture issue, which I'd say still resonates these days.
Kon actually said that wasn't his intention, which that kind of plays into the next one, or his next movie we'll get to, but yeah.
I can certainly believe that. It's more the fact that there's been an understood problem when it comes to the way idols are treated. This has been a known issue for a while. Yeah. It kind of came back into the forefront with the whole thing with Maki Ito, where she tried to go the idol route, was just one body among many, and couldn't stand out. She was able to stand out by, 1, not giving a fuck, and 2, by becoming a Joshi. Because apparently us Westerners really like the idea of a tiny Japanese girl flipping people off.
But yeah, that aspect of the movie, it wasn't really intended on his part. I think it kind of just came with the base premise of the story. That was always going to be a big takeaway people got. That really is where this movie, you start to see Kon really develop his own style, like as a director. Because it was very distinct even amongst all those... Like, we talked about it a bit in some previous shows, how, like, in the States... anime was just kind of seen, or animation was seen as a bit of a kid's thing. And while that wasn't nearly the case in Japan, things like Perfect Blue you really weren't seeing at the time he made it.
The funny thing is, when it came to its international release, it first made appearances in the festival circuit and got a couple awards in Montreal and Portugal. Apparently, it's stated that it got favorable reviews, but some of the comments about the reviews are baffling. Like the comments about it being over-stylized. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys on about? I did feel validated when I found out that Darren Aronofsky cited Perfect Blue as an inspiration for Black Swan. Yeah. I should say he acknowledged the similarities, but denied that one was inspired by the others. I have a hard time believing.
Yeah.
I ranted about this on Geek Watch, but I'm reminded of how David Cage tried to claim that Detroit Become Human wasn't a civil rights allegory. When it name drops Martin Luther King, "We Shall Overcome" is used in the third act, and there's frequent allusions to both Dr. King and Malcolm X throughout the text.
Yeah.
But it wasn't trying to be a civil rights allegory.
I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with David Cage.
For me, it's not a love-hate
Hate.
relationship.
It's mostly hate.
Look, when I did the episode of Geek Watch talking about him, I used Sam Lake as a bit of contrast.
I will still give David Cage this. The man can create a very powerful atmosphere. He just doesn't understand how people function, and he undermines his own abilities very regularly because of it. Yeah. Getting back to the
matter at hand, I do distinctly remember Perfect Blue making a lot of noise especially when people started diving headfirst into DVDs, because there was a bit of a DVD boom after 9/11. I'm not saying those things are directly correlated, but more the fact that you had a lot of people staying at home and watching DVDs, and you of course had that explosion of DVD becoming a far more becoming a very affordable format. Unless you were trying to get box sets for anime, then you'd have to pay out the fucking ass. Of course, when you end up hitting the ground running with something like that, there's the issue of how do you follow up on that? And I feel like Millennium Actress was him trying to do a redo of the intent with Perfect Blue.
It's one like I did read quite a few interviews from Cohen around these times. It's not so much he wanted to redo he wanted to show the other side of the coin, as he put it.
That's kind of what I was shooting at.
He felt a little bad for how bad he made some of the Idol fans and culture look with Perfect Blue, just because of how absolutely insane that fan was. So he didn't just want to portray all these industries as like full of all of this horrible stuff going on. He wanted something a bit more romanticized. Enter Millennium Actress, which I did not actually see until I watched it before we did this. So this was my first time seeing that movie.
I feel like you're gonna have a different view of Millennium Actress if you were watching it at around the time that it came out. You know, after a lot of people had already seen Perfect Blue.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is there's gonna be a bit the timing of seeing it now versus seeing it in the early 2000s is going to have different feels, I think.
A little bit, yeah. I can see that.
Of course, the other thing that makes it difficult is that if you were watching it dubbed, there's two different dubs of it. There was the Village Productions dub in 2005 and the 11 Arts dub in 2019.
I want to say I saw the original of the two dubs, but I can't guarantee that.
I think the other thing that's interesting with it is this was not a work for hire job. He wasn't hired to direct the project. This was his own thing.
I believe this would actually be the first time it was just his own thing from start to end.
I do have to wonder how the hell he got Susumu Hirasawa to help out.
No, who is Hirasawa? Or Hirasawa again?
He is a composer. He's done a lot of work, and he would do a lot of work for Kon's work. So he clearly saw something in him.
That's one of the weird things you notice looking over Kon's work. Like, he was clearly popular, but he was never like the biggest thing around yet. So he had a lot of influence and caught a lot of attention from some very specific people.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why, because apparently Millennium Actress was better received by critics at the time than Perfect Blue was. I think part of the reason is the whole concept of idol culture and the issues of moving away from that into another field. That's something that a lot of audiences outside of Japan aren't going to be able to fully work with. Not because it's too Japanese or something, but it is something that's very specific to Japan. The closest thing that you see to the idol culture thing outside of Japan is maybe at most celebrity worship, but that still feels like a stretch. I'd say the closest thing to non-Japanese idols is certain VTubers.
Yeah. Like, I think as time's gone on, like, Perfect Blue who just seems to resonate more and more when compared to Millennium Actress.
Yeah, but Millennium Actress being focused so much more on film, I think is part of the reason he was able to establish a better connection with people. It's still him refining his theme of the blurred lines between fantasy and reality.
I do like how he took a different approach with it than he did with Perfect Blue, where Perfect Blue, she was basically in the midst of a mental breakdown through a good chunk of that story, which is where the blurring started to come from. Millennium Actress, it's the same blurring of fantasy and reality, but it's more just getting swept up in just this glorious story this actress is telling about her life. And you start to see like the mixing of the people just in the actual room appearing as parts of the set and story that she's telling. So it's applying the exact same kind of idea and philosophy to something entirely different.
Yeah, and after that, of course, was Tokyo Godfathers, which why is this movie not discussed when talking about Christmas movies?
I don't know. It never got a dub, did it? Because I think you can only watch the subtitles on this one.
It did recently. G-Kids, who seems to be the anime equivalent to Criterion, did dub it in 2019.
I think that might be why.
And I'm being somewhat facetious, but you look at a lot of the stuff that G-Kids has been putting out, and they're basically the anime studio that you can. They're not the anime studio. They're the anime distribution group where you can show their stuff to the normie parts of your family in order for them to get it. Which is probably the reason why why I so frequently see limited theatrical runs with G-Kids stuff, including Inuo, which I plan on seeing because it's Masaki Yuasa, so I'm a glutton for punishment because he's probably going to break my brain somehow. But I'd say that, Tokyo Godfathers feels like is a case of him breaking away from his fiction and reality motif a bit. It is. To that, I mean, it isn't as blatant as it was with Perfect Blue and Millennium Actress.
Yeah.
So I think Tokyo Godfathers was Kon attempting to stretch his legs. Of course, then we get to the big one with Paranoia Agent, which is I think is up until this point, Satoshi Kon had kind of become a best kept secret in animation. Or he was known by people who were in the know, but hadn't full on broke out. Paranoia Agent was where that changed.
This show is an absolute trip.
And imagine my surprise, Susumu Hirasawa did the music for it. I think one of the things that certainly helped was the distribution it got over cable television, because right around this time was when Adult Swim was really breaking out. I know that apparently in Canada it was on G4 Tech TV and then later Anime Current, but I've already talked about G4. I don't feel like talking about it again for a while, unless somebody else tries to mess with it.
No, it turns out this is something that came up on something called Paranoia Radio. We talked about this a little bit before we actually started recording, so for anyone who doesn't know what Paranoia Radio is, on the original DVD releases of Paranoia Agent, on the 4th DVD, you could listen to the director's commentary over the last 3 episodes. One of the people who was an animator on it, I forget which one because there's a couple different animators over its run. And Taro, one of the producers, were just talking about it. They said one of the things that kind of did get the show a lot of buzz, they found out, was people talking about the opening. So weird fucking opening.
You know that I love contrast, and this is a classic case of it, with people having these laughing, celebratory expressions while things are going to more and more shit.
Now, do you have any idea what the message in that opening, just that whole opening was, or why it was made that way?
No.
As he put it, all the forum posts he'd read at the time, anyone talking about it, not one person got it right. In Japan, they had to air this show at midnight. He wanted something that'll wake people up for the show. So he had a bunch of people laughing. That was it. There was no deep meaning or connection to the show. It was just to wake people up.
For almost 20 years, people have been reading way too much into this.
And I guess after saying that, you can figure out what the point of the ending was. It's all right, you guys can go to bed now. He wanted the contrast of the images and the characters laughing just because it kind of fit the theme of the show. But yeah, he just wanted to wake people up because it aired at midnight.
Even with that, it's if somebody was expecting I'd say this particular series was where he decided to delve feet first into the whole fantasy and reality thing. And you know how we talked about the is it or is it not the case regarding the relationship between Perfect Blue and idol culture? We kind of have that in a different form, just instead of idol culture, otaku culture. Yeah. To a point. it isn't nearly as much of as much of a apparent slam as what we saw with Perfect Blue.
Yeah.
I say apparent slam because again he didn't intend on that.
Especially with this one, like, he had his hand in so much of this show. Pretty much everything came across as he intended, except the oddity of the opening.
Mm-hmm. Which does make me wonder if at one point if Yuasa had been taking some notes.
Yeah, like, initially, as he put it, like, his premise for Paranoia Agent, and again, why it got the name, is he described it like a kid who doesn't want to go to school. He tells his parents, I have a stomach ache. He keeps telling his parents, I have a stomach ache, I have a stomach, until eventually he actually does start to develop a stomach ache. Kon says he believes that stomach ache is real, but it's not coming from an injury, it's not coming from a sickness. It's just kind of a self-defense mechanism he thinks people have, like paranoia, self-delusion. He thinks things like this are kind of like a necessary part of a person's like mental self-defense, but it can be taken too far where people start to get delusional, which became the premise for what he did with Paranoia Agent.
I'd say another factor is he in Lil Slugger strikes me as the anime form of a mimetic virus. The kind of mimetic virus that was a subtext in games like Eclipse Phase, because it starts out as what would become a little white lie that gets believed to the point where it gets out of hand, and later in the series the titular Lil Slugger looks far more monstrous.
Yeah, he's an agent willed into existence by mass paranoia. I think the altering of lead characters episode to episode really helped that. Like, you had Akari as the detective, as basically the kind of a backbone connecting everything, just like as someone to follow along through all the different stories. But it's a shifting of the main characters and like just showing the spread of Little Slugger, as it were. Like, apparently he had the idea he wanted to do something like that before he knew he wanted to do Paranoia Agent. And he just kind of realized both of these ideas worked very well together, so he could finally have fun with a rotating main character.
Which I think he did fairly well for the most part. There are a couple episodes that feel like Twilight Zone episodes, especially the one about the ladies who are telling rumors.
See, on one hand, I do think that episode was somewhat necessary because it did spread to... It kind of showed how it became just a guy with a bat to someone who was an actual monster.
The Dragon Quest illusion with the fake Little Slugger did make me laugh, though.
That was great. I will say, there is one episode that really... You could cut it entirely and nothing would be lost from like the overall story. But Happy Family Planning remains one of the most dementedly hilarious episodes of any show I've ever seen. I don't know at what point he sat down on, we need a comic relief episode focused on an old man, kind of a middle-aged gay guy, and a 12-year-old girl trying to kill themselves and failing horribly. This is what this show needs. I absolutely love that episode. But I understand you need kind of a dark sense of humor to laugh at that shit.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
After that, you once again have the issue of what comes next, and his answer was going straight back to film with Paprika, which I'd say Paprika does feel like I think a lot of people said this feels like a successor in some regards to Perfect Blue. Not in terms of story per se, but in terms of presentation.
Another one, it's got all of his just great themes that he's done before. Mm-hmm. The blurring of fantasy and reality, this time by literally diving into people's dreams.
Which, in hindsight, makes me wonder if... I know that this isn't the case, but I do have to wonder if Christopher Nolan was looking at Satoshi Kon's works and taking notes.
Oh, he definitely was.
In fact, a lot of critics had compared Paprika to Inception. I don't think it's enough to say one's a ripoff of the other, though.
Oh, definitely not. I don't think there's any getting around. Inception did take some inspiration from Paprika, but that's what it was, inspiration.
I bring that kind of thing up because a lot of people are very quick to refer to something as a ripoff, but it's important to not get trigger happy with this kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
But Paprika, funny story when it comes to it. It took me a while to finish because trying to watch the thing was a curse. I'm about to watch the film, and midway through, power goes out. Then I try and do it again, and I find out my DVD player at the time was kaput.
Of course.
So third time around, I'm finally able to watch the film. So third time's the charm, but still, and even after that, it was a case of it took me months to even pick up the DVD again because I thought I had gotten some cursed disc. Technically speaking, Paprika was his last major film. He had one project called Good Morning that was part of a shorts collection called Anikuri 15.
Basically, he was just showing off some animation.
Yeah, because those 1 minute shorts were broadcast by NHK over between 2007 and 2008. It was meant to be filler between actual programs, so it's a glorified commercial.
I mean, he did fantastic on it, though. Like, he's clearly still an animator at heart, and an artist at heart.
Oh, that's where he cut his teeth.
Yeah. Like, it's another thing with, like, Paranoia Agent, something you'd get listening through all those Paranoia Radio episodes. Well, for people who also don't know about, like, the production on Paranoia Agent, it was an absolute clusterfuck. Like, it's another thing we talked about a little bit before, but...
I think that's the reason why they had an episode of Paranoia Agent taking the piss out of themselves.
The hilarious part about that episode, too, that was the second time, at least... Well, not like the second... But like the second just major time where they thought right before the episode was come out, the show was going to end. Because more of those production issues were happening as they were making the episode about production issues. Very early on, Kon decided, we're going to do every episode in-house. Now, even though Paranoia wasn't like, even when it came out, it wasn't the most like animation-intensive show you were going to find. That is a huge process to undertake for one studio who has never done a TV series before. Everything to get done in-house. No outsourcing of one thing in that show.
Which is interesting because Paranoia Agent had the animation help of Madhouse.
Yeah.
I do find it kind of amusing that there were plans for a film adaptation. I don't know if it was live action, and whatever the plans were, they didn't come to fruition because the film never came out.
Yeah. The third episode was the first one that was almost finished. They scraped out the first episode quick enough after they realized, oh shit, almost none of it was done. One of their lead animators left for a while, just before they could even start on episode 2. So Kon was doing all the animations on episode 2, as well as, being the director. Now he's also doing key animations, a lot of the art for it. Every person on that team wanted their name off of episode 2 because they thought it was going to turn out shit. So they created all these fake names to put on the credits until they realized right at the end, oh shit, this episode's going to be good. And all those fake names are the ones that got used in the production episode later on.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the name Alan Smithy?
Yeah. We brought that up a few times on this show.
Yeah, I feel like that is apropos to this situation. Yeah.
But no, it was beginning to end. The entire production was stuff like this going wrong. They had a good laugh about it during the Paranoia Radio.
Well, yeah. When you end up finding a way to brute force your way through a successful production when everything in the universe is conspiring against you. Yeah.
Or the one guy who got hired on or brought in, like towards the end of the run of the series. I just realized what's a perfect analogy when it comes to the behind the scenes tumult. Especially when you mentioned that somebody was brought in. Yeah. I am immediately reminded of the behind the scenes chaos that happened with Stalker. Especially when a build of the game ended up getting leaked. And
things got so bad that THQ had brought in one of their guys to try and whip the team across the finish line to get the game done. And the team hated him, and he didn't like them either, because they're like, "What's this California motherfucker coming in all the way over here?" And by some miracle, he managed to get them into shape to actually get the damn game shipped, because by this point it was way behind schedule. And there's a whole article on Eurogamer that goes into details, but the point is it was a shit show.
Last little bit though I'll share from just that Paranoia Radio. It was for like the last 3 episodes they still needed to get done, when one of the guys, I think it was from Madhouse, came in, was like, alright, you brought me in, what can we do to help? Now this guy was an animator, but he'd never done like key animations before. So where you think the story is going is they're going to tell him, alright, we're going to need you on the key animations to get this done. No, they needed an animation director, but only for episode 10. When they got that finished, they got someone else back. So then he moved down to key animations.
I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall when that happened. Like, okay, I'm ready to do key animations for you guys. You're gonna be directing animation for this episode. What?
Like, I don't even think he went in knowing, or like, it didn't sound like he went in thinking he was even going to be doing key animations. He just got told, "You're the animation director now." Oh, okay.
Which is kind of like getting promoted on a pirate ship. It's like,
yeah.
It's like first mate tries to insubordinate, gets shot. Then the captain goes to the first person he sees and says, "Congratulations on your new promotion. You're now first mate."
Yeah.
Because remember, the beatings will continue until morale improves. But even so, I don't think he came into the thing prepared for the idea that he would be doing directing duties.
No. It sounds like he found out the day he got there, and he was starting to do directing that day. He did a good job.
Yeah, he did a good. I'm not besmirching his talents. It's just a case of doing animation, analog or digital, is chaos as it is. So what's the worst thing you can add to that? Well, more chaos.
Yeah.
I do think it's a damn crime that the Paranoia Radio segments were not put in any of the future re-releases.
Yeah, because
just that one limited release.
Yeah, like, again, I think it might be on the Blu-ray, but I don't know like how big that Blu-ray did.
If it isn't on the Blu-ray, that is a damn shame.
Yeah,
and it's an equally damn shame that we cannot find it on any sort of service.
Yeah, because like I had the original DVDs, so I'm lucky that I knew these things existed.
I know a lot of people scoff at things like director's commentary on DVD, director or actor commentary, but sometimes you end up learning interesting things when it comes to the chaos of trying to get these kind of things made. And those, in some cases, the interest level of those stories ends up being more entertaining than the show they actually made. The big example that I use is Heaven's Gate. The film Heaven's Gate is a good film, but it is not nearly as interesting as the shit show that was the film's development.
I will confirm, I'm looking at the Blu-ray description. It does come with Paranoia Radio audio commentaries.
Okay, bullet dodged there. Because if it was the original DVDs, well, you're gonna have to pay out the ass and hope you don't get screwed.
Yeah.
If you want to try and get them these days.
Yeah. DVD 4, it will not be on any of like the single collections. So either the original single 4th DVD or the Blu-ray, which it's only like $25 right now.
I figured the Blu-ray would be easier to get.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Kon's legacy, looking back at some of the stuff that he's done and some of the stuff that I've watched over the last few years, I've mentioned Masaki Yuasa in the past, and I can't help but wonder if he's ever cited Satoshi Kon's work as an inspiration for him. Especially since he also has a story in his bibliography about dream sharing. That anime being Kaiba.
It's another one that's come up a few times on this show that I still need to sit down to watch.
Kaiba is weird. That is the best and most charitable way for me to describe it, is fucking weird. Then again, you can say that with a lot of his work, but especially since you have the combination of that concept of dream sharing, while a lot of the visuals feel like something that came straight out of Dr. Seuss. Of course, this inspiration thing that goes more than one way, obviously. Apparently, there was one project he was going to be working on, but never finished. That being Dreaming Machine. But unfortunately, Madhouse said they don't have enough money to try and get it done. He said that at Otakon 2012. But that's been in directorial hell. People who have been involved with it have been looking for a director to complete that work.
It just no one feels right, as they put it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you ever sit down and read, like, effectively Satoshi Kon's last words?
No.
Like, he released it on his blog. It is so depressing and just weird to read. He basically had that thing that a lot of dying people will have, where they have kind of that stretch of time before they die where their mind clears up a bit, they have a bit more energy.
Mm-hmm.
To people who aren't used to seeing that, it looks like they're starting to make a recovery. As he said, he knew that wasn't going to happen. So he took the time to actually arrange all of his thoughts, wrote them all out while he basically had the time to do it, and it was released on his blog after he died, which is how most people found out he was even dying of cancer. Like, that's one of the things he said was actually his biggest regret, was he wasn't going to get to finish Dreaming Machine, and he realized because of how involved Kon is in every aspect of the stuff he does, he knew a lot of people didn't really realize what it was he was trying to get out of it by the end. It was kind of sad to read that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, if you were down to read, like, just a dying man's words, basically, that blog post of his is absolutely fascinating to read through. Talks a lot about his family, like how much pride he took in everything he did. Apologies to some of the people he worked with on Dreaming Machine because he figured it seemed like a chance it may never get done.
Mm-hmm. Which I think shows that he would. You mentioned before that he was a animator he was an animator and artist to the end. I think that is a case in point.
I know it's typical that you'll see a lot of anime directors that they really do leave marks on their work. From what I was reading, it sounds like Kon himself may have been more involved in anything he did than even most other of those big directors. Because he does a lot of stuff that he's never even credited for in any of the movie or any of his work. From animations, like he did for a lot of Paranoia Agent. No credits on animations for any of those episodes. And again, something like Perfect Blue, where he was basically the script writer.
Mm-hmm.
No credit for being the script writer.
It is one of those unfortunate tales, but I'd say the legacy of Satoshi Kon is even with that issue, the work that he put out still resonates with a lot of people, and I think I don't see that changing anytime soon.
It's like a lot of that's going to be stuff that's universal. Shared paranoia is not a thing that's going to go away. No matter the time, I think Paranoia Agent's going to ring with people. Same with things like Perfect Blue and Millennium Actress.
If anything, I'd say that more people need to take a deeper look at Paranoia Agent these days, with how everybody is paranoid about their political tribes. I'm getting ahead of myself.
One thing I do also want to bring up from one of the interviews, he's almost, in a way, for how he is behind the scenes, like the reverse of Miyazaki when we talked about him.
How so?
Because, Miyazaki had a very limited view in what he wanted his movies to be, and he seemed kind of standoffish to anything that fell outside of that purview.
He was dogmatic design is what it was.
Yeah. Now, in a way, Kon was a lot like that when he was making his stuff, but an interviewer who'd send him a bunch of questions. Again, I wish I had remembered to save that link back when I looked up all this up. Basically, I'm like, hey, you said you don't like... Well, the interviewer phrased the question like Kon said something in the past about all these scantily clad women and stuff, like it was a bad thing, but he asked Kon about it. Kon's like, Oh yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see an end of just like again scantily clad women and just all this excess violence for the sake of it. But I don't think that's a bad thing. He essentially said like there's a place for all of that, and because a lot of that does bring in a lot of eyes and audiences, someone who makes all the weird offbeat stuff like him can also find an audience. So he is very kind of specific in the kind of stuff he wants to make, but he also realizes that's what he does, that's what he likes, and that there's a lot of room for other stuff to exist right alongside of him. So I say it was kind of interesting going from like looking up some of Miyazaki's stuff in interviews and thoughts, and then seeing what Kon's thoughts were.
But I think with all that
Yeah.
we've covered everything that we could possibly cover with him.
Oh yeah, because I think as we mentioned earlier, like he doesn't have nearly the body of work a lot of other people do, but I don't think he really needed it. As much as I would have loved to see Dreaming Machine.
At the very least, if it's not gonna come out in animated form, just put out some of the storyboards as an art book.
I think like over 50% of the animation frames were done.
So
Yeah.
so just make a big ass art book.
Yeah. Art book, maybe release some of the animations just to see what it was that he did manage to get finished.
If Tecton Create
Yeah.
can get away with doing two separate art books at the same time, I think we can. I think this is not out of the realm of possibility.
Oh yeah. All right then. So it's been fun talking about Satoshi Kon. Because again, I absolutely love this guy's work. But with everything that needs to be said out of the way, I guess we will see you next month when we get our next episode recorded.
Stay frosty.